In studio right now, 2nd District Congressman French Hill. Thank you very much for joining us this
Thanks,
Sunday
Bob.
morning.
Glad to be with you.
As mentioned, a lot to get to. We'll do what we can. But first thing, a lot of eyes were on a particular event that took place at high schools all across the country. This was a walkout done for or against particular gun laws that may be on the books, and in solidarity to the 17 people who lost their lives in Florida, the mass shooting there. Your thoughts on what you saw these young people take part in?
Well, a great tragedy, and out of tragedy occasionally comes something constructive. And one of those constructive things here was seeing our young people engaged in the public debate and public policy, and I thought it was impressive to see them in Washington around the country.
Do you think this is something, too, that we saw it after Sandy Hook, we saw it after Columbine, we saw it certainly after Jonesboro, where people start talking about tougher gun laws? Is it the tougher gun law? Is it I guess you say get more stricter authority with the laws we have in the books? Should we ban the assault-style rifle? Should we raise the age to purchase such weapons? Some of the things are being tossed around there. Yeah. Will you support some of those, or what do we do to keep the conversation going?
Well, the first thing I think we ought to do is recommit ourselves that we keep guns out of the hands of people who are not qualified to have them. The mentally ill, those who have been convicted of domestic violence, people who are felons, people who are dishonorably discharged. And so that's why the House passed last year and the Senate's working on it now, a way to strengthen the national background check system, where apparently not everybody who needs to be in it is there. And I think one of the big challenges is mental health from that point of view, because I don't think everyone who should be disqualified due to mental health or potential violence is in that system. And that's touchy in our legal system on how to get them there, but I think that's an important thing we need to do. And it was one of the failures, clearly, in the Florida case.
I was going to say, there were a host of failures here. Yeah. How do we go back and shore that up? I mean, through some more legislation or
well, I think some of it does take legislation. In the dishonorable discharge issue out in Texas and that shooting at the church, he'd been dishonorably discharged, but the Air Force had not put it in the background check system. And we have increased penalties on people who don't adequately do that. We have increased grant money to help strengthen local law enforcement to make sure it gets in there. As I say, if you're convicted of a felony or domestic violence for many years, you are not allowed to buy a firearm. But I think the toughest area is mental health. And one thing I've heard a lot of people talking about at the state level are these gun violence restraining orders, where people can go through due process and see if there isn't a way then to remove guns from the possession of somebody that is a danger to themselves or others. And if they're found so dangerous or guilty of that, then they can go in the background check system. And I think that's a way to improve the background check system.
Going the other way, do we put guns in the hands of educators in the classroom, on school campuses?
A good question, but I think more controversial. Here in the state of Arkansas, there's some 19 schools, 3 in our congressional district, that under a law passed by the state of Arkansas can have select personnel, not necessarily teachers, but select personnel that are on campus that are qualified and licensed by the state police as someone who's trained as a law enforcement professional. And I think some of our school administrators think that works pretty well here. Also, Mike Poore here in the Little Rock School District is going to really beef up a uniformed protection force around campuses and raise the visibility level. I think anything that sends a message that keeps our kids safe. How do we keep our kids safe is the #1 objective. We can keep airports safe, we keep football games safe, so let's make our schools a safe place.
Moving on to some economic issues, a big thing that's been talked about, the tariffs, steel and aluminum. We've got a big steel manufacturer here in Arkansas. We're a big agricultural, one of the largest. We have to think about our exports when it comes to the ag industry. You're not a big supporter of tariffs. Are you hoping that the president kind of sets up some sort of a negotiation tool for these tariffs, or do you want them to maybe just let's walk them back?
Well, I don't support broad-based tariffs like the ones that the president proposed. I think targeting people for bad behavior in trade is good. President Trump's talked a lot about that on the campaign, and as president, he should be tough on trade, particularly with China. But across the board tariffs raise prices to consumers, and they hurt other manufacturers here in the country that are doing intermediate goods manufacturing. We have several places here, Pine Bluff, Conway, and up in northwest Arkansas, that make the steel belts and steel belted radials. Well, the wire cable that they make is an imported product, and yet those tires are all sold and made in the United States. So, plus the retaliation risk is there. You mentioned agriculture. We're a big ag state. When President Obama put tariffs on steel radial tires from China, we got a soybean retaliation from China. When President Bush tried steel tariffs back in 2002, they also had a lot of retaliation.
There's nothing on the table that would let us think otherwise. So we could imagine something similar would happen.
I do, and the European Union, the EU, has already proposed a retaliation list for U.S. products. So I think consumers can be hurt, and I think while there might be some modest steel jobs increased in some areas, including over on the Arkansas River, other manufacturers suffer and have layoffs. I think in President Trump's example, or President Bush's example back in '02, I think about 2,000 jobs were created in the steel industry, but some 200,000 jobs were negatively impacted from those tariffs.
Something we've got to...
So we need to be tough on trade, but we need to be smart in how we do it.
Pros and cons, exactly. Yeah. Talking about spending, next week's a busy week for you guys. What are you planning on seeing? What do you hope gets done?
Well, a month ago, President Trump reached agreement with the Democrats and the Republicans in the House and Senate on spending for FY18 and FY19. And next week, we need to bring that to the floor and vote on the particular details, how we're going to spend the money for defense and how we're going to spend the money for non-defense. It's going to be a very busy week. I'm hoping that we get the final detailed drafts that I want to see help our C-130 program out at Little Rock Air Force Base. And one that I've talked to the governor about is how we're going to spend this opioid money. President Trump's gotten the Congress to agree to $6 billion for opioid help in the states. Very critical issue around the country, and we need to see in this bill next week how will that be spent in each state.
We talk about bills. The Senate moved to roll back some of the DoddFrank requirements. DoddFrank, of course, was put into play in 2010
yep.
Following the '08 collapse, where a lot of banking institutions had to be bailed out.
Right.
Happy with that particular maneuver?
Well, the Senate bill is a good bill. They worked hard on it. It's taken 8 years to live with Dodd-Frank and see what should be changed to make sure that we get consumers the credit and access they need, and businesses the capital they need to grow. So I think the Senate passed a good bill. We have some good ideas in the House as well. We've passed some 90 bills on a bipartisan basis that are similar to the bill the Senate passed. So we're going to try to get together in the next few weeks and produce a really good bill that will help consumers, entrepreneurs, and our local community banks, and get that to President Trump.
We talk about the banking industry. Arkansas is in the middle right now of growing the medical cannabis industry,
right.
Literally from the ground up. And it's a supporter from on a certain level, I can imagine. There's also the watching what banks get involved with this. What are your concerns there?
Well, I do have concerns. We've seen this in California. We've seen this in Colorado, where states have gone on to legalize some form of marijuana, either recreationally or medical marijuana, and yet it's still a federal crime to deal in marijuana and a federal crime in banking to provide financial resources to it. So federal and state law are in conflict. So I do have a concern.
It's got to be a tightrope for those in the banking industry, and you've got a banking background.
Yeah, it is a tightrope. And out in California, the credit union industry has tried to pioneer a way to thread that very tough area by doing extra due diligence and extra care in the cash handling for marijuana businesses. I've talked to Attorney General Sessions about it to try to help him understand the challenge we have in Arkansas about our bank, since it's brand new here in this state. And I don't see him inclined to changing his outlook on federal law there. So I think banks are, right at this moment, have to be very careful about how to provide the financial services to these new businesses in the state.